I have two problems that I'm always a little embarrassed to admit to, because there's always those who believe neither to be the real problem. The first problem is that I've had no long-term relationships in a long time. The second is that my house is haunted. Cue people lecturing me about priorities and handing me unsolicited life advice. I mention these things more to explain how the third of the 5 entities came to join my house. This was coming to a year of me living at the house. By that time, I'd set up a working, if not uncomfortable, relationship with the 2 entities. Knox, the first entity you might remember, communicates by creaking the house. 1 for yes, 2 for no. If I enter a room and I hear 2 knocks, I leave and return later. Other than that, communication between the 2 of us is seldom. The second entity lives in the basement and is appeased by milk and bread that I leave out every night. Truth be told, I don't know what guarantees my offerings confer upon me. I know it wanders around the house some nights, in some form. Because of that, I only leave my bedroom out of absolute necessity once it's dark. It has left me mostly unmolested in the sanctuary of my bedroom. Perhaps that's because I have left a line of iron dust along the threshold every night. It's surprising how quickly we can normalize lousy situations. There I was, having gotten so used to the little rituals in my life that kept the shadows at bay, I was beginning to divert my attention to other things, like the absence of a love life. I'm not great with online dating. My social circles have been frozen since graduation, plus I work from home mostly. Added to the challenge of finding dates, I was constantly wondering how on earth I would take a girl home to a haunted house. That was how I met Ella. Ella was the exact opposite of a girl that I would bring home to meet my mother. She was tattooed, pierced in all the wrong places. Well, all the right places, if you're me, I suppose. She smoked, wore heavy makeup, her thick, wavy hair dyed an electric purple. We met at a geek convention in another town. She was a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, and we learned we both lived in the same city. We somehow ended up hanging out around the same group because of, shared hometown, and although I couldn't take my eyes off of her, I had no idea how to strike up a conversation with her. My friend Vivian, however, forever my wingman, noticed me eyeing Ella, but doing nothing about it. So, she happened to let spill in conversation that I lived in a haunted house. Really? Ella squealed, her pink contacts locking with mine properly for the first time. I actually don't like talking about the conditions of my house. It's like thinking about a room that you should have cleaned out months ago. Except now the pile of clothes on the floor has been lying there for so long, it's developed a taste for human flesh. Yeah, I found myself saying, like really haunted. I don't actually know why you still live there, V added. Ella clapped her hands like a little girl. Oh my God, all right, tell me everything. So I did. She listened intently, gasping and nodding all the time. I don't remember any girl giving me this much attention for quite some time. Listen, you may not believe me, but I've been living with my guardian spirit and a whole bunch of other spirits my entire life. I've got the third eye, and I can see things that people can't. It's so rare to find a real haunting. Can I please visit your house? Ella begged. That's when several alarm bells started going off in my head. Firstly, who on earth goes out seeking these kinds of things with such glee? Secondly, bringing someone into the house who was so eager to get a reaction from the entities sounded as good an idea as poking a bear. Knox had proven to be benign. The basement thing, on the other hand, I was certain had the capacity to maim and kill. But in a city far from home, under bright sunshine, with the rapt attention of a beautiful girl, I said I suppose she could try. As the convention went on, Ella became quite friendly with me. Yet, it still surprised me that she said yes when I asked her out on a date. We went on our first date the evening the convention ended. Before we parted, she gave me a kiss on the cheek, and I promised her a tour of my house. A week later, Friday afternoon, she came over. When she got out of her car, she was rapt. I don't know what she saw when she looked at my house, but I guess it was everything she had hoped for. Now that it was actually happening, I was pretty nervous as I brought her around the place. Knox stayed strangely quiet. Perhaps he was used to people being apprehensive, as opposed to enthusiastic. However, upon entering the laundry room, 2 sharp raps sounded on the wall. Ella laughed excitedly and put her hands over her mouth. I quickly grabbed her by the shoulder and led her out of the room. I hesitated at the basement door, but she really wanted to go down there. It was the main attraction, after all. I'd been down there before, but that was before my last harrowing experience. Since then, I actually hadn't gone down there. It was still daylight, and the basement thing seemed dormant by day. So, not believing what I was doing for a pretty girl, I agreed to a very short visit downstairs. I warned her to keep her voice low, and she promised that if I said to leave, she would leave. She promised. So, very cautiously, I opened the basement door. I had not fixed the broken light in there, but there was enough light from the kitchen we could see all the way down. Holding her hand, I led her down the stairs. It was as I remembered it. Old, dusty tables with chairs stacked upside down against one wall. A little further on the opposite wall, an odd opening jutted into it. I've never understood what that space was for. You might have a small fridge in it if you were lucky, and only if it was lying on its side. Were it not for the yellow-painted diagonal scaffolding that crisscrossed it, that was. The space was its lair. Ella suddenly went ahead of me and approached it. I gripped her hand, and she turned back to look at me with a smile and intent in her eye. I shook my head at her, but she let my hand fall and approached the space noiselessly. She placed her hands within the foreboding area and beamed to herself. I would have grabbed her and forced her out of the basement, had I not been terrified of waking the entity with noise and clamor. To my relief, Ella retreated, seeming satisfied. She reached back, holding my hand again, and we left the basement. Once we were out and I'd shut the basement door, Ella burst into squealing joy. "That was amazing! I've never felt such an aura. Trust me, I have spent nights in so many abandoned buildings and so many graveyards. Most everything's rubbish, but oh my God, you have the real deal." It was about 4 in the afternoon then. It was still light, but for the last few months I tended to have dinner early so that I could retreat to my bedroom well before night. This led to an odd puzzle I'd been musing over. If I chose to bring Ella out for dinner, I might be returning to the house well after dark, which was far from preferable. If we ate at home, I would have to ask Ella to leave early, which seemed a little rude and against my wishes to spend more time with her. Ella provided the solution before I even presented the option to her. "Would you mind if I stayed the night?" I gulped nervously. Well, I could cook us an early dinner, and I guess we could watch a movie in my room. It's the safest place in the house after dark." She nodded enthusiastically, with bright, shining eyes. I'll spare everyone the details of the evening, but let's just say being in a haunted house really excited her. Something weird happened in the morning, though. I went into the attached bathroom to brush my teeth. Looking in the mirror, I saw Ella pop her head around the corner and look at me. It was only for a moment, then she ducked out. I finished brushing my teeth and went back into the bedroom. Ella was under the covers, still looking asleep. "You can use the bathroom now," I said. "Huh?" she said, sleepily turning over. "Oh, I thought you wanted the bathroom." She shook her head, her purple hair rippling across her face. Before I could pursue the matter any further, she got up and let the blankets fall off and pulled me into a kiss. Any questions I had blanked out of my mind. Like I said, the house really seemed to excite her. She was back a couple of weeks later. She would have returned sooner, but she had work stuff. She worked at a gallery and a series of event centers, and they'd had some talks that night. When she got out of her car, she was wearing an outfit that most certainly got my blood running. Whatever excitement I might have felt was put to a slow death when she opened her passenger door to reveal the most terrifying object I'd ever seen. An old, weathered doll. I'm even more petrified of dolls than I am of the dark, and that's saying something. "Hey, I want you to meet my lifelong friend, Edward. He's my spirit guide, and he's so happy to be here," she said, introducing the doll. Edward was a thing of my nightmares. Seeming made of pink plastic, he was 4 feet in length and wore a faded sleeping gown that matched his nightcap. It may have once sported some kind of pattern of sorts, but it now just looked blotched and diseased. His face was worn, and worse, the paint was stained and smeared in all manner of ways, giving the doll the impression of having been melted in a fire, as well as mauled by a bear, maybe. It seemed to glare at me with its jet black eyes, and its smile was unsettling, to say the least, like a snake that spotted its next meal. He was my Nan's. That's great. Hey, Ed, you're not bringing him inside, are you? Ella smiled at me and put a hand on my arm. She stood beside me, turning to face the creepy doll sitting in the car. Then she whispered in my ear, "Don't call him Ed. He doesn't like it. It's Edward. And of course I'm bringing him into the house." Look, I really don't think that's a good idea. It's okay. Edward can move around a bit on his own, but he's never hurt me, and there's his seal," she said. She lifted his nightcap and showed me a strange symbol that had been seared into his bald plastic head. She put it back down. "Nan told me that he's safe as long as the seal remains intact." He moves around? Just a little. He's not coming into the house." Ella made a face that seemed to ask if I was serious and call me a coward at the same time. Then she suddenly had a look on her face, like she was hearing something that only she could really hear, and she leaned towards Edward. "Huh? Oh, okay. Edward says he understands and he'll stay in the car." She closed the car door and looked mildly disappointed, but she gave me a smile and grabbed my hand as she led me into the house. I noted that she hadn't locked her car, but didn't say anything, as I felt I'd gotten as much of a compromise as I was going to get. I could feel the doll's eyes on me all the way back to the house. We'd finished watching a movie together in bed, and it was close to midnight. Ella was lying against me, and I could tell that she was bored. Suddenly, she sat up with a mischievous grin on her face. "Let's go." Go where?" "Explore your house, duh." "Ella, I know you're really into this kind of thing, but the basement thing isn't something that you want to mess with." "I have protection," she said dismissively. "Come on, let's go. I can't believe you're not curious." I'm very not curious. What do you mean protection?" "Look, I don't want to get into it, but I used to be in a sisterhood, and we made deals. It was kind of messed up, and I got out okay, but some of those contracts were binding, both ways, so things don't mess with me, and I have Edward. Come on." Her plastic friend's protection was not convincing, and I didn't budge an inch. "All right, fine," she said, a wild gleam in her eye. "I'm going by myself. You wait here." What? Wait, no!" But she'd already flung the door open and run out into the house. It had been a while since I faced the darkness of my home. I heard her footsteps going down the stairs. Then she said something that I couldn't quite make out. I was frozen on my bed, listening for more sounds, but there was only silence. When I couldn't take it anymore, I crept out of bed and approached the open door. "Ella," I said, my voice hoarse. There was no response down the stairs. I looked on the floor and noted that her feet had scraped my iron filings aside. I grabbed a small broom I had and put them back in a line across the threshold. hoping to keep whatever was in the basement at bay. Then I took a step over the black dust line into the corridor. 2 groans shuddered through the house. 2 for no. It was Knox. But I had never heard it sound like that before. Deep and loud. I got the impression of a cat bristling, trying to appear 3 times its size. Was Knox angry? Or was he scared? The last time I went against Knox's advice had been when my niece had gone into the basement. But the circumstances felt different now. My instincts screamed at me, and I made my way down the stairs despite them. At the top of the landing, I flicked on the stair light. Edward stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me. "God!" I yelled, falling over. I scrambled backwards till my back hit the wall. Edward's eyes appeared black and empty, like a shark's. "Ella!" I cried out. "I thought we agreed the doll stays in the car." There was no reply. "Ella!" I called out again. "I'm going back in my room and locking the door." Still no response. "If you want back in, just knock on the door and tell me, okay?" Picking myself up, I ran back to my room, constantly glancing back at the stairs, half expecting Edward to appear on the landing. I slammed the door behind me, flipped the lock, and slid to the floor, breathing hard. Hours went by, and I didn't hear a sound for the rest of the night. Not even the creak of wood from Knox. I think I fell asleep with my back against the door, because I suddenly realized it was dawn. My windows were gray, and I could make out the silhouette of the treetops. I really needed the bathroom at that point. Hoping the morning brought my usual safety, I left my vigil over the door and went to the bathroom. Just in the middle of my business, I saw movement in the mirror. I couldn't see directly into my room, but I could see into the bedroom via the mirror. It was Ella. She appeared to have entered the bedroom and was crossing to the other side. To get her phone, maybe, I thought. "Ella?" I called out. Pulling up my pants and flushing the toilet, I hurried out, but Ella wasn't in the room. My room door was locked. How had she gotten in? How had she gotten out again? I didn't see her phone either. Had she taken it downstairs with her last night? I decided my sleep-deprived brain was just playing tricks on me. Frowning, I steeled myself and opened the bedroom door. The landing was empty. I stepped out into the corridor, listening for Knox to sound again, but I only heard morning birdsong. Very gingerly, I tiptoed to the stairs and looked down. Edward was nowhere to be found. I descended to the ground floor, and the house felt empty. Neither Edward nor Ella were anywhere to be seen. When I checked the driveway, her car was gone. When I'd gone through all the rooms, just in case Edward was hiding somewhere, I sighed, got my phone, and called Ella. She didn't pick up. I sent her a few messages throughout the morning, but I got no reply. Feeling lost about what to do, I began cleaning up the house. But as time went on, I began to get that odd feeling that I wasn't alone. While Knox was a somewhat omnipresent being in the house, I hadn't felt spooked by it for a long time. I started to get goosebumps. Someone or something was watching me. My next glimpse of what it was happened in my garage. There's a long, full-length mirror stood against the wall in there that I'd never found a place for, so there it stayed. I saw Ella in it, poking her head out from one side of the garage entrance. I spun around thinking she'd come back, but there was no one there. I went outside, but I didn't see her car either. I heard a creak from the house. Knox? What was that supposed to mean? A bit later, still feeling lost, I decided I'd drive to the supermarket and stock up. The store wasn't far, and being around people milling and shopping might make me feel better. The fear from the previous night had turned into disappointment that Ella had just vanished on me. I was driving home when I glanced into the rearview mirror, and Ella was staring back at me from the back seat. I screamed, accidentally stepping on the gas, and sent my car up the curve. The car jolted to a stop before I hit a small tree and somehow managed to unfasten my seatbelt, tumbling out the door and scrambling away from the vehicle. But I stopped after a few feet. What if Ella was stuck in the car and needed help? I came back to the car, cautiously, as though it might blow up any second. But the back seat was empty. It wasn't just that Ella shouldn't have been in the back seat of my car. It was the expression she'd had. She'd been smiling at me with a deranged look in her eye. I checked all my tires, and it appeared intact. The car looked drivable, but I didn't want to drive. I didn't even want to test it. Instead, I called V. "Hey, I really need your help." She must have heard the tension in my voice. Without question, she rolled up to me 20 minutes later. "You okay?" she asked, getting out of the car. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't think I can drive right now." V frowned at me and looked at the car. "I can take you home, but what are you going to do about your car?" We were in a small housing estate, and the road itself was pretty quiet. No one had come out to see what had happened during the accident. "You reckon I could leave it here for the night?" I asked. V shrugged. "Well, at least park it straight. Here, give me your keys." I handed V the keys, hoping it would be safe to let her inside the car. She parked the car without incident and came out. I felt relieved when she was fine, but then I felt sick. V gave me a concerned look as she walked back to me. "Hey, what's going on? Talk to me." I could only stare at the ground, not even sure where to start. Evening was coming, and shadows were drawing up long across the ground. Do you think I could stay at yours tonight?" I asked V. "I don't think my house is safe to go back to. I don't think I should be alone." V put her arms around me and led me back to her car. I totally forgot about my groceries. I sat in the passenger seat and was silent the whole drive, doing my best not to look into the mirror. When we got to V's, I broke down and cried. V hugged me and rubbed my back as though I were a kid. After a bit, while holding back sobs, I told V what had transpired over the last couple of weeks. She nodded in an understanding manner and didn't interrupt. At the end of it, she took a look around her house, stood up, and started putting stuff away. I realized she was clearing away anything that had a reflection on it. When she was done, she sat opposite me and took out her phone. "Well," she said in a problematic tone, "I think it's time you got some help." "What, a psychologist?" "No, I was thinking more exorcist." "What?" "Maybe a priest or a pastor." I decided to open my phone and start searching too. Just as I was about to press the first link on my search bar, my phone started ringing. "Ella?" I said, putting the phone to my ear. V looked back as her eyebrows raised. "Hey, can we meet, like somewhere in town?" "Yeah," I said slowly. I have questions." I know, I'm sorry," Ella replied. She gave me the address of a cafe in town. "I'll tell you what I can when we meet," she said, and abruptly put the phone down. V had her arms crossed when I looked up at her. Could you give me a ride?" "She better have a good explanation," V said, getting up and grabbing her jacket. The cafe had a small park across from it. V said she'd sit on a bench at the edge of the park, keeping me in sight. Ella was already sitting at a table out on the footpath with a cup of coffee before her. She wasn't drinking it, and she looked embarrassed. I took a seat opposite her. Hey, she said softly, trying to give me a smile. "So, you've been gone for less than a day, but I'm already seeing you everywhere I go," I said with a nervous grin. It wasn't a good joke. "Yeah," she said incredulously. "I know what you mean. Want to tell me what that's about?" "It's Edward," she said with a half whisper. "He doesn't like you. He really doesn't like you." That made me grit my teeth in anger for some reason. Feeling is definitely mutual. He doesn't want us to spend time with each other anymore, Ella said, staring into her cup. "Have you considered that taking relationship advice from a possessed doll is incredibly unhealthy, says the guy who refuses to move out of his haunted house. Touché, I said with a sigh. Look, I'm sorry. I like you. I really do. You're a sweet guy. You deserve much better, but Edward's all the family I have left. Family? It was Ella's turn to sigh. Sorry, but I have to listen to him. There were tears in her eyes now. No, you don't, Ella, I said, reaching out to hold her hand. Her hand shrank away from mine. He let loose one of them on you, she said quietly. I paused. In my sad, pathetic life, I've done a lot of stupid things. Some bad things. Some of them have led to spirits being attached to me. There's always Edward. I was hoping since you already lived in a haunted house, you would find me and these bizarre things I come with acceptable, I guess. Ella, She raised a hand and cut me off. She took a shaky breath and then mumbled something. I only caught the start of her sentence. He unleashed the... Unleashed the what? Its name means the one who walks the mirrors. It was one of the spirits Edward's protecting me from. I think he trapped it within himself. Now he's let it go. It'll haunt your reflection, traveling from one mirror to the next. It can even come out, I think. My blood ran cold. I stopped breathing. Can it be stopped? Ella shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. I'm sorry, I've said too much already. Then, before I could stop her, she ran to her car. Wait, why does it look like you? What does it want? I cried after her. She didn't answer. She got into her car and started the engine. I saw Edward strapped into the passenger seat. I could feel those venomous black eyes boring into me. As Ella drove past, I swear the thing turned to stare at me. Have you ever felt so scared that your guts feel like they're going to empty its contents in both directions at the same time? Yet at the same time, a desperate anger lit a small flame against the hopelessness inside of me. It was the smile on Edward's face that did it. It was a victorious smile. Edward had gotten the girl and destroyed his competition. Except I wasn't destroyed yet, was I? My muscles felt like they were made of jelly, but somehow I stood up in defiance with my fist clenched, staring at Ella's car as it drove out of sight. V had crossed the road and was approaching me. What happened? Are you okay? I turned to V. I was shivering badly, but I couldn't tell from dread or fury. I got a plan, I told her through gritted teeth. That doll. That goddamn doll. It thought I didn't remember what the symbol on its head looked like. Later at my house, I think it was about 10:30, I stood with V in the living room. She was holding a simple hand mirror. I was preparing a couple of things on the countertop. You're crazy. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And I've seen some pretty dumb stuff. Yeah, I grimaced. Knox had been quiet. There was no presence from the basement either. It was as if both understood that what I was doing was important, and they were giving me room to do so. V had been uncomfortable entering the house. She had a bad experience with Knox once. I told you about that. I told her she didn't need to do this for me, but she insisted that someone had to save my ass if everything went to hell. I felt it approaching. The feeling that I was being watched deepened. I put my finger to my lips and V simmered down. Silently, I motioned for V to pass me the hand mirror. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and held it up so I could see my face in it. I then angled it so I could see over my shoulder. Behind me was the archway to the kitchen, which was lit by a soft orange glow. I didn't have to wait long. Something that might have been Ella popped its head to the right of the arch, then ducked away. The hair on my neck stood on end. A few minutes crept by, and V was shifting uncomfortably, foot to foot, her eyes darting from one shadow to another. I kept my eyes on the mirror, though. Then, even though I was expecting it, it was all I could do not to scream as a pale face with purple hair peeked over my shoulder. It smiled at me with a thin black smile and stared at me with unblinking eyes. It didn't really look like Ella, not close up. I frowned back at it, waiting to see what it would do. I think my defiance angered it, as its smile turned into a baring of teeth that were long and inhuman. I heard V gasp by my side. I think she had seen it in the mirror. Her gasp made me take my eyes off it for a split second. When I glanced back, I saw a white hand shooting out, filling the whole mirror, as if it meant to grab my face. I let go of the mirror and ducked to avoid the grasping hand. The mirror and I tumbled onto the carpeted floor, and V shrieked. That's when it got quiet. I got up and looked down. The mirror had landed face up, and I could see the thing thrashing about inside it. It appeared to be snarling and screaming, but I could hear nothing. Its background seemed to have frozen too. Rather than the ceiling, the mirror contained the living room and the kitchen archway, the same as it had when I was holding it. The thing was running around the mirror room in a hobbling fashion, but it didn't seem to be able to find its way out. It just kept running back and forth, and then it returned to the mirror's surface to thump and scream against it once more. I could hear V screaming her head off. Slowly I knelt down and held the mirror by its handle, lifting it up. I felt like I had a deadly spider in my hand, separated by a thin layer of glass in the container. "You're insane. You are actually insane," I heard V still going on. In the reverse of the mirror, I had etched onto the plastic the symbol I'd seen on Edward's cap. My gamble had worked. I'd lured the mirror demon into this mirror, on the off chance that the seal would trap it within. The theory could have gone wrong on so many levels. What if it required more than just the symbol to turn the mirror into a trap? What if the mirror demon couldn't be trapped the same way that Edward had in the doll? What if the mirror demon had used a different mirror to attack me? I don't know. All I knew was that it had worked. I put the mirror in a soft cloth bag and tightened the drawstring. Then I put the bag into a small safe box I had previously used for my passports and things. I'd stuffed it full of padding. I heard the safe box click as the numbers went back into something that wasn't the combination. I also put a padlock onto the ring that it had. On the safe and the padlock, I also drew the symbol with the permanent marker. V appeared to have calmed down somewhat now that the mirror was out of sight. "All right," she said, trying to catch her breath. "Okay, you caught the thing. Congrats, genius. You won. What now?" I stepped back from the locked safe, blood still rushing in my ears as I breathed heavily. V was right. I'd won. I'd allowed the feeling of victory to wash over me. For a moment, I felt like I could have taken on the entire world. Then I remembered the thing in the basement. My courage was somewhat humbled. Now I think I'm going to drink a very large glass of water. Then one day I'm going to cover this safe in cement. Then I'm somehow going to get a boat and drop it in the middle of the ocean. A single rap sounded from somewhere in the house. Vivian jumped as ever. It's okay, I said, putting a hand on her to calm her. I think the house was agreeing with me. "Hey, that offer to stay over at yours still stand?" V nodded at me and looked pale, unconvinced that Knox meant her no harm. "Let's say we get out of here then." I put the safe in my closet, then closed up the house. V followed me close everywhere, and Knox was very polite about not scaring her further. I left extra milk and bread by the basement as a thank you for giving me my space. I hope it understood the gesture. Then we left my house of horrors, at least for that night. What follows, I guess, is a bit of epilogue on the whole affair, and the preemptive questions I'm anticipating. Firstly, yes, V is a good friend whom I'm surprised to be blessed with. I surprised her the week after with a brand new game console that I know she'd been waiting for. Then there's the issue of keeping the mirror. Would smashing the mirror kill the thing or release it? I don't know. I felt unconfident about testing it. So I didn't break it. I faced the problem and kept wanting to keep it in sight at all times, not wanting it out of sight ever. In the end, I compromised on my rule. I cooperated with Knox. It seemed to not like the thing any more than I did. We found a place in the house it approved of hiding it. I won't say where. Then I just trusted that Knox would guard it and warn me if anything happened. If anyone's going to ask me what the symbol is, I won't tell you. V thinks that it might get Colts or something looking for me, and I've got enough problems to deal with. Thank you very much. Sorry, I truly hope I don't run into the mirror demon again. Finally, was I serious about cementing the mirror and dropping it in the ocean? I was, in fact. I just have to find someone who's willing to take on a job like that, of cementing a mystery box when other things started to happen. It's not the last time I had to deal with the mirror demon. There's still Entity 4 and 5 to tell you about, though. Perhaps I'll tell you a little more sometime. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.